The phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, and when I saw the caller ID, my entire body went cold. 5 years. 5 years of silence. And now Dominic Lewis was calling me like nothing had happened, like he hadn't slapped me across the face in that suffocating sauna on Christmas Eve, like I hadn't disappeared into the night while my family celebrated without even noticing I was gone. My name is Brielle Ferguson, and I'm 28 years old now. But to understand why that phone call made my hands shake, you need to know what happened when I was 23. Back then, I was home from college for what I thought would be a perfect Christmas at my mother's lakehouse in Vermont. The kind of place that looks like a Pinterest board threw up all over it. Rustic wood beams, stone fireplaces, and enough twinkling lights to be seen from space. My mother Caroline had married Dominic Lewis when I was 15, and he'd transformed our modest life into this luxury bubble that always felt like it might pop if I breathed too hard. Dominic owned a chain of high-end hotels across New England, the kind where they charge you $50 for scrambled eggs and call it artisanal breakfast experience. He never liked me much. I was the reminder that Caroline had a life before him, a life that included my father who died when I was 12, leaving behind nothing but memories and supposedly a mountain of debt. That Christmas Eve, the whole family was gathered for our tradition, a Finnish-style sauna session that Dominic insisted made us more sophisticated than families who just watched movies together. The temperature was set to roughly the surface of Mercury, and everyone was there. Caroline in her designer swimsuit that cost more than my college textbooks, Dominic's son Trevor, who never missed a chance to mention his Harvard MBA, and various cousins who showed up whenever free food was involved. I'd been sitting there, trying not to pass out from the heat, when Trevor started bragging about his new hotel management company. Something about his numbers didn't add up. He claimed to have secured contracts worth millions despite being in business for only 6 months. I made the mistake of asking how a startup could land such huge deals so quickly. The sauna went quiet except for the hiss of water on hot stones. Dominic's face turned a shade of red that had nothing to do with the heat. He stood up, walked over to where I was sitting, and before I could even process what was happening, his hand connected with my face. The sound echoed off the wooden walls like a gunshot. But here's the thing about saunas. The steam was so thick and everyone was so focused on not dying from heat stroke that nobody else saw it happen. Or maybe they did and chose not to see. I'll never know for sure. Dominic leaned close to my ear and whispered that I should keep my mouth shut about things I didn't understand. That this family didn't need a troublemaker. That I was lucky he even let me come home for the holidays. I sat there for exactly 3 more minutes. I know because I counted each second, then quietly excused myself, saying I felt lightheaded. My mother barely looked up from her conversation about her book club's latest selection. Trevor smirked like he knew exactly what had happened. And Dominic? He just settled back onto his bench like he'd swatted a mosquito. I went to my room, packed everything I could fit into 2 suitcases, and left a note saying I had to return to campus early for a project. Then I climbed into my beat-up Toyota Corolla and drove through the night to Seattle, where my college roommate's family had offered me their garage apartment. I never went back. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Caroline was confused, then concerned, then angry. How could I leave without saying goodbye? How could I ruin Christmas? Didn't I know how much effort she'd put into planning everything? Not once did she ask if something had happened. Not once did she wonder why her daughter would flee into the night like a refugee. I changed my phone number after a week, closed my social media accounts, told anyone who asked that my family and I had grown apart. It was easier than explaining that my mother had chosen her luxury life over protecting her daughter, that my stepfather was not just a bully but potentially a criminal, that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to disappear completely. But now, 5 years later, Dominic had found my new number. His voice on the voicemail was exactly as I remembered, commanding, entitled, and absolutely certain that I would do whatever he wanted. Brielle, this is your stepfather. I need you to come home immediately. There are family matters that require your signature, and your continued absence is causing significant problems. Your mother isn't well, and this childish rebellion of yours has gone on long enough. Be here by December 20th, or there will be consequences you won't enjoy. We both know you can't afford to ignore this. Consequences. The man who assaulted me was threatening me with consequences. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see everything. Thank you so much. Those 5 years in Seattle weren't easy, but they were mine. Every struggle, every small victory, every step forward happened because I chose it, not because someone was pulling my strings like a marionette. The first year was the hardest. I worked 3 jobs: barista at a coffee shop that opened at 4 a.m., evening shifts at a bookstore, and weekend catering gigs where I served appetizers to people who reminded me too much of Dominic. My garage apartment was so small I could touch both walls if I stretched out my arms, and the heating only worked when it felt like it. But it was mine, paid for with money I earned, and nobody could slap me for asking questions. Caroline tried to reach out constantly at first. She sent emails with subject lines like, "Please just talk to me," and "You're breaking my heart." Each one followed the same pattern: concern that felt hollow, confusion that felt performed, and always, a defense of Dominic. He was stressed about business. He didn't mean whatever I thought he meant. I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too willing to throw away family over a misunderstanding. The birthday cards were the worst. Every year, she'd send one with a guilt trip message written in her perfect cursive: "Another year without my daughter. I pray you found whatever you were looking for. Dad and I are always here when you're ready to apologize and come home." Dad. She called him Dad, like he hadn't hit her actual daughter, like we were some happy sitcom family just waiting for the wayward child to see reason. What Caroline didn't know was that I'd channeled all my anger into something productive. I went back to school for hospitality management, but with a twist. I specialized in forensic accounting for hotels. Turns out, when you grow up watching someone cook the books at the dinner table, you develop a pretty good nose for financial fraud. My professor, Dr. Martinez, said I had an uncanny ability to spot discrepancies that others missed. I didn't tell him it was because I'd spent years watching Dominic move money around like a shell game. By year 3, I'd started my own consulting firm, Clarity Hospitality Solutions. We specialized in helping hotels clean up their financial systems and expose fraud. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was basically training to take down people like my stepfather. My business partner, Jackson, was a former IRS auditor who'd gotten tired of government bureaucracy. He had a gift for making tax evaders sweat just by looking at them, and an even better gift for making me laugh when the family stuff got too heavy. The success felt good, but what felt better was discovering something through social media stalking that I probably shouldn't have been doing. Trevor, my stepbrother, had launched his own hotel management company called Lewis Legacy Ventures. The website featured a case study that made my blood boil. It was my college thesis project, word for word with his name on it. The project I'd spent 6 months developing, involving a revolutionary booking system that could increase hotel revenue by 30%. He'd stolen it and built an entire company around it. But here's where it gets interesting. Jackson noticed something odd about Trevor's company during one of our wine and wine sessions. Despite launching during a recession, despite having no real experience, Trevor had somehow secured contracts with dozens of high-end hotels that just happened to be in Dominic's network, hotels that were now under federal investigation for money laundering. The investigation wasn't public yet. Jackson still had friends in the IRS who mentioned things they shouldn't over beer, but apparently someone had been using a network of New England hotels to wash money for some very unfriendly people. The kind of people who don't accept "I didn't know" as an excuse. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt proud that my instincts about Dominic were right. Instead, I felt sad for Carolyn. She'd traded her daughter for a man who was probably going to federal prison. She'd chosen designer handbags over family, and those handbags were bought with dirty money. The call from Dominic came just as Jackson and I were preparing a proposal for a major hotel chain, wanting a full audit. His timing was spectacularly bad, or maybe spectacularly good, depending on how you looked at it. That evening, Jackson found me staring at my phone like it might bite me. I'd listened to Dominic's voicemail 17 times, each replay making me angrier than the last. The audacity of demanding I come home, the threat about consequences, the lie about Caroline being unwell, though maybe living with a criminal husband counted as a kind of sickness. Jackson poured me a glass of wine and said something that changed everything. You know, if they're demanding you come back this urgently, it means they need something from you. And if they need something from you, it means you have power you don't even know about yet. He was right. Dominic Lewis never did anything without calculation. If he was breaking 5 years of silence, if he was threatening me, it was because something had gone very, very wrong in his perfect little empire. I looked up flights to Vermont that night. I called Dominic back at exactly 9 a.m. Eastern the next day, mainly because I knew he'd be in the middle of his precious morning workout routine. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. He answered on the second ring, slightly out of breath. Brielle, finally. I was beginning to think you'd lost all sense of family responsibility. Family responsibility. The man who hit me wanted to lecture me about family responsibility. I gripped my phone so hard I thought it might crack. What do you want, Dominic? I kept my voice professional, cold. The same tone I used with hotel managers who thought they could hide embezzlement behind fancy spreadsheets. What I want is for you to stop this childish tantrum and come home. There are documents that require your signature, family trust papers that can't be processed without all beneficiaries present. Your absence is holding up significant financial matters. I almost laughed. Family trust? What family trust? When my father died, Dominic had made it very clear that he'd left nothing but debt, that everything we had now was thanks to Dominic's generosity. But now, suddenly, there were trust documents? I'm not signing anything, Dominic, and I'm certainly not coming back to Vermont. There was a pause, then his voice dropped to that menacing whisper I remembered from the sauna. Your mother has been unwell since you abandoned her. The stress of losing her only daughter has taken its toll. The least you could do is see her before it's too late. Before it's too late? Was he actually implying Caroline was dying? I'd seen her Instagram posts from her Pilates class just last week. She looked healthier than ever, probably from all that organic food and medical spa treatments. Is she sick? Or are you sick of being investigated by the IRS? The silence that followed was beautiful. I could practically hear his jaw clenching through the phone. I don't know what ridiculous rumors you've heard, but my businesses are perfectly legitimate. However, the federal government has decided to conduct a routine audit, and they're asking questions about family members. Your refusal to be part of this family makes us all look suspicious. Is that what you want? To destroy everything your mother and I have built? Everything they'd built. On my father's supposed debt. On my stolen thesis. On what I was beginning to suspect was my money. Jackson had done some digging after I'd told him about the call. Turns out, my father hadn't left debt at all. He'd left a life insurance policy and a trust fund for me, to be accessed when I turned 25. Guess who was listed as the trustee? Dear old stepdad Dominic. Tell me about my father's trust fund, Dominic. Another beautiful silence. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. Your father's affairs were complicated. There were debts, obligations. I've managed everything appropriately, and you'll receive what's yours when you sign the necessary papers. And if I don't sign, then you get nothing. And your mother loses everything in this federal investigation. They're freezing assets, Brielle. They're threatening to take the house, the cars, everything. Your mother could end up on the street because you're too proud to come home and sign a few papers. It was manipulation 101, and not even good manipulation. But it told me everything I needed to know. They were desperate. The investigation was real and serious, and somehow my signature was the key to something important. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before he could respond. Jackson was sitting across from me in our office, having heard my side of the conversation. He had that look he got when he was about to uncover major fraud, like a bloodhound who'd caught a scent. So, he said, pulling up his laptop, want to know what I found out about Lewis Legacy Ventures? Trevor's company was a shell. A very profitable shell, but a shell nonetheless. Every contract it had was with hotels in Dominic's network. Money would flow from the hotels to Trevor's company for consulting services, then disappear into offshore accounts. Classic money laundering, but with a family twist. But here's where it got interesting. The FBI had been watching for months. They had most of what they needed, but there was one problem. Some of the key documents had my name on them. Not my signature, but my name as a beneficiary of trusts that were being used to move money. They need you to sign papers that will retroactively authorize what they've been doing, Jackson explained. Without your signature, the whole house of cards falls apart. With it, they might be able to claim everything was legitimate family business. I stared at the screen showing Trevor's company finances. My thesis project had become a money laundering operation. My inheritance had become a slush fund. My family had become a criminal enterprise. But there was something else in the data that made me smile. The FBI investigation wasn't just routine. It was triggered by a whistleblower. Someone inside Dominic's organization had been feeding them information for years. I thought about Estelle, the housekeeper who'd worked for the family since before Dominic arrived. She'd always been kind to me, always seemed to see more than she let on. She'd been there that night in the sauna, cleaning up afterwards. Had she seen what happened? Had she been watching Dominic all these years, waiting for the right moment? I booked a flight to Vermont for December 20th, not because Dominic demanded it, but because I finally understood what Jackson meant about having power. They needed me. They were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. The drive from Burlington Airport to the lakehouse took exactly 93 minutes, and every mile brought back memories I'd tried to bury. The last time I'd driven this road, I was fleeing in my old Toyota Corolla with tears freezing on my cheeks. Now I was driving a rented Tesla, wearing a suit that cost more than Dominic used to give Caroline for her monthly allowance. And I wasn't crying. I was hunting. The house looked exactly the same, aggressive perfection masquerading as rustic charm. Someone had already decorated for Christmas, and the whole place looked like a holiday movie set. Except in movies, the families actually love each other. Now, Caroline must have been watching from the window because she flew out the door before I even parked. She looked older, despite all the Botox and filler. Her hug felt desperate, clinging, like she was trying to squeeze 5 years of absence into one moment. Brielle, oh my God, you look so sophisticated, so successful. I've missed you so much. She pulled back to study my face, and I saw the exact moment she noticed I wasn't the scared 23-year-old who'd run away. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe? Or just confusion that her daughter had grown a spine? Dominic appeared in the doorway, trying to look patriarchal and welcoming. He'd aged worse than Caroline. His hair was thinning, his jaw softer, and there was a tremor in his hands that suggested either too much coffee or too much scotch. Probably both. Brielle, welcome home. He didn't move to hug me, which was fine. If he'd tried, I might have called the FBI right then and there. Trevor slouched out behind him, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Harvard MBA, Trevor had gained 40 pounds and lost most of his hair. Success was apparently stressful when it was built on fraud. He looked at me like I was a bomb that might explode. "Sister, so good to see you." His fake enthusiasm would have been insulting if it wasn't so pathetic. The house smelled like Caroline's signature Christmas cookie recipe, mixed with the sharp tang of anxiety. They led me to the living room, where papers were already spread across the coffee table. Subtle. "Can I at least put my bags down before we discuss business?" I asked, enjoying how they all jumped at the word business. Caroline fluttered around me, showing me to my old room, which had been preserved like a shrine to who they thought I was. My college pennants, my high school photos, even my old stuffed animals. It was creepy and sad in equal measure. Dinner that night was a masterpiece of awkwardness. Caroline had made all my old favorites, as if pot roast could heal 5 years of abandonment. Dominic kept trying to steer the conversation toward the papers, while Trevor drank wine like it was water and typed frantically on his phone under the table. "So," Dominic finally said over dessert, "let's discuss why you're really here." "I thought I was here because you threatened me with consequences if I didn't come." Caroline's fork clattered against her plate. "Threatened? Dominic, you said you just invited her." "It was an invitation." he said smoothly, but his knuckles were white as he gripped his wine glass. Just a firm one. The trust papers need to be signed before year-end for tax purposes. What trust papers? I asked innocently. Dad told me my father left nothing but debt. The silence was delicious. Caroline looked confused. Dominic looked furious, and Trevor looked like he might throw up into his tiramisu. Your father's situation was complicated, Dominic started, but I cut him off. Was it? Because I've been doing some research. Fascinating what you can find in public records, like how my father actually had $1 million life insurance policy and a trust fund set up for me, with you as the trustee. Caroline's gasp was theatrical. Dominic, you said, I said I would handle everything, and I have. The money was used to pay off debts, to maintain this lifestyle you've become accustomed to. There were investments made on Brielle's behalf. Investments like Trevor's company? I asked sweetly. The one built on my stolen thesis project. Trevor's wine glass shattered in his hand. Actually shattered. Red wine and blood mixed on the white tablecloth like a crime scene. Caroline jumped up to help him, but I stayed focused on Dominic. His mask was slipping, and underneath was the same rage I'd seen in the sauna 5 years ago. You ungrateful little... Careful, Dominic. We wouldn't want to have another incident like Christmas Eve 5 years ago, would we? Everyone froze. Trevor, still bleeding, stopped moving. Caroline, holding napkins, turned to look at her husband. And Dominic looked like I'd just pulled a gun on him. I don't know what you think happened, but I know exactly what happened. And so does someone else. Someone who's been watching you for years. Someone who's been documenting everything. I wasn't sure if Estelle was the whistleblower, but the way Dominic's eyes immediately darted toward the kitchen told me I was right. She'd seen it all, and she'd been keeping score. Now, I said, standing up, I'm tired from my flight. We can discuss the papers tomorrow, but just so we're clear, I won't be signing anything until I understand exactly where every penny of my father's money went. And I mean every penny. I walked upstairs, leaving them in their ruined dinner, and called Jackson from my old bedroom. How's the family reunion? He asked. About as warm as that sauna was. Did you get the recording? Crystal clear. Trevor admitting to stealing your thesis was particularly beautiful. The FBI is going to love this. I'd been wearing a wire. Of course I had. Jackson had contacts who were very interested in the Lewis family's financial adventures, and they'd been happy to make me an unofficial asset. Tomorrow they want me to sign papers. Should I? Absolutely not. But let them show you everything. The more desperate they get, the more they'll reveal. That night, I heard them arguing downstairs. Caroline's voice got shrill when she was scared, and she was hitting notes that could shatter Crystal. Dominic's responses were low, threatening rumbles, and occasionally Trevor's whining cut through it all. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you're still with me, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen next. Your support means everything to me. I couldn't sleep that night, but not because of anxiety. I was too wired, too ready for what was coming. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft knock on my door. Before I could respond, Estelle slipped inside, moving with the silence of someone who'd spent decades trying to be invisible. She was older than I remembered, her hair completely gray now, but her eyes were sharp as ever. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was younger and had nightmares. I knew you'd come back, she whispered. I've been waiting. You're the whistleblower. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. 5 years I've been feeding information to the FBI. Every document I could copy, every conversation I overheard, every suspicious transaction. All for you, Brielle. You saw what happened in the sauna. Her face hardened. I saw everything. The slap, the threat, the way your mother pretended nothing happened. I had been recording Dominic's business conversations in the sauna for weeks. He thought the steam would hide his dealings. That night, I made sure to save the recording before he could have the system cleaned. I've kept it safe all these years. My hands shook as she pulled out a flash drive from her pocket. Everything's on here, including that recording from Christmas Eve. I made copies immediately after it happened, knowing someday you'd need proof. Why risk so much for me? Because I had a daughter once. She married a man like Dominic, By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. She died in a car accident that wasn't really an accident. I couldn't save her, but I could save you. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Tomorrow, when they pressure you to sign, remember, your father didn't just leave you money. He left you land, acres of it, in prime development territory. Dominic's been using it as collateral for loans to fund his money laundering. If you sign those papers, you're signing it all over to him. After she left, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The amount of evidence was staggering. Financial records, recorded conversations, emails between Dominic and Trevor discussing how to move money through the hotels. And there, dated 5 years ago, was the sauna recording. I heard my own voice asking about Trevor's contracts. Then the sound of movement, the sharp crack of the slap, and Dominic's threat. But what I hadn't heard that night was what came after I left. Caroline's voice, clear as day. Maybe that will finally teach her to mind her own business. My own mother. She hadn't just ignored the assault, she'd approved of it. The next morning, breakfast was tense. Caroline tried to act normal, making small talk about her book club and asking about my life in Seattle. But her hands shook as she poured coffee, and she kept glancing at Dominic like she was checking for permission to speak. Trevor looked worse than the night before. The bandage on his hand was already blood-stained, and his face had the gray pallor of someone who hadn't slept. He kept checking his phone, then looking at his father with increasing panic. "The papers," Dominic said without preamble, sliding a stack toward me. "Sign them, and you'll receive a check for $50,000. More than fair for an inheritance that was mostly consumed by debts." I flipped through them slowly, recognizing the legal language Jackson had warned me about. These weren't just release forms. They were retroactive authorizations for every illegal transaction Dominic had made using my name and my father's trust. $50,000? I laughed. My father's life insurance alone was $1 million. The trust fund was another $2 million. The land you've been using as collateral is worth at least $5 million. And you're offering me $50,000? Trevor made a choking sound. Caroline's coffee mug crashed to the floor. "How did you—" Dominic started, then stopped himself. "Those figures aren't accurate. There were debts, taxes, investment losses. Investment losses like the $3 million you moved through Trevor's shell company to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. This time, Trevor actually did throw up. He ran to the bathroom and we could all hear him retching. Caroline stood frozen, coffee pooling around her designer shoes. "I want to see the books," I said calmly. "All of them. Every transaction, every investment, every debt payment. And I want to see them now, or I walk out that door and go straight to the FBI." That was a bluff. I was already working with the FBI, but they didn't know that. Dominic's face went through a fascinating series of colors before settling on a kind of purple rage. "You little witch! You have no idea what you're playing with. The people whose money flows through my hotels aren't the kind who accept delays or investigations. If you don't sign these papers, if this investigation continues, people will get hurt, starting with your mother." "Are you threatening me again? Because I'm recording this conversation, just so you know." I pulled out my phone, showing the recording app clearly running. It was almost comical how quickly he backpedaled. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm explaining reality. This family is in danger because of federal overreach and misunderstandings. We need to present a united front. The only thing we need," I said, standing up, "is for you to stop lying. Estelle!" She appeared in the doorway like she'd been waiting for her cue, which she had. "Estelle has been keeping records for years," I announced. "Every fraudulent transaction, every threat, every crime, including what happened in the sauna 5 years ago. She saved the recording that very night before you could have the system wiped." Caroline finally found her voice. "Estelle, our housekeeper, you've been spying on us." "I've been documenting crimes, Mrs. Lewis. There's a difference." The look on Dominic's face was pure murder. If we'd been alone, I genuinely think he might have tried to kill me. But we weren't alone. And unbeknownst to him, FBI agents were parked in a van just outside the gate, listening to every word through the wire I was wearing. "Family meeting in the sauna," Dominic commanded suddenly. "Now, everyone!" The sauna. Of course he wanted to return to the scene of his first crime against me. But this time I wasn't a scared college student. This time I was ready for war. The sauna looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago. All cedar wood and volcanic stones, like a torture chamber designed by a Scandinavian decorator. Dominic had cranked the temperature up to his usual hellish setting, probably thinking the heat would make us more pliable. He didn't know I'd spent the last 5 years doing hot yoga in Seattle, where instructors treated sweat like a religious experience. We all filed in, Dominic commanding the highest bench like a king on his throne, Caroline beside him looking like she might faint, Trevor hunched in the corner, still clutching his bandaged hand, and me sitting exactly where I'd been 5 years ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone. "Phones outside," Dominic ordered. "This is a family discussion." I made a show of leaving my phone on the shelf outside, but the wire I was wearing was sewn into my sports bra. The FBI agent listening in had assured me it was waterproof and heat-resistant up to 200 degrees. We were about to test that claim. Dominic poured water on the stones, filling the room with suffocating steam. "You want to know about the money? Fine. Let's talk about reality, Brielle. Your father was a dreamer, a failed businessman who left behind grand plans and empty promises. Yes, there was insurance money. Yes, there was a trust. But do you know what else there was? Connections to people who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse for non-payment. You're saying my father owed money to criminals?" I kept my voice steady, though inside I was reeling. "I'm saying your father made deals with people to fund his business ventures. When he died, those debts didn't disappear. They transferred to your mother, to you. I protected this family by taking over those obligations." Caroline was crying now, the heat making her mascara run in black rivers down her cheeks. "It's true, Brielle. Your father borrowed from some very dangerous people. Dominic saved us. By laundering money through his hotels?" The silence was thick as the steam. Trevor made a squeaking sound like a dying mouse. "By doing what was necessary," Dominic said slowly, "to keep the wolves at bay. Every transaction, every movement of funds, it all goes to satisfying debts and keeping this family safe. But now, with your selfishness, your refusal to sign these papers, you're putting everyone at risk. So you hit me 5 years ago because I was getting too close to the truth? I disciplined you because you were about to expose something that would have gotten us all killed. Disciplined, like I was a misbehaving dog. The wire was definitely picking up my increased heart rate along with his confession. And my inheritance, the land, collateral, all of it pledged to keep the operation running. If you don't sign those papers, if this investigation continues, the people we owe won't care that you're innocent. They'll see you as a liability." Trevor suddenly lurched forward. "Dad, stop. Just stop. She doesn't understand what she's doing. Brielle, please, just sign the papers. I'll give you half my company. I'll publicly credit you for the thesis project, whatever you want. Just sign them." His desperation was pathetic, but also revealing. They were more scared than I'd realized. "Here's what I understand," I said, standing up despite the oppressive heat. "You took my father's death as an opportunity. You married my mother for access to his assets. You used my inheritance to build your criminal empire. And when I started asking questions, you assaulted me." "It was hardly assault," Dominic started, but I cut him off. "It was recorded." The words hung in the air like the steam around us. Dominic's eyes went wide, then narrow, then calculating. "You're lying. Estelle recorded everything that happened in this sauna. She'd been documenting your business dealings for weeks, saved the Christmas Eve recording immediately after it happened, including what Mom said after I left." "What was it again? Maybe that will finally teach her to mind her own business?" Caroline gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I was in shock. "I didn't mean." "You meant it enough to never check on me, to never ask why I really left, to choose him and his money over your own daughter." The heat was becoming unbearable, but I wasn't leaving, not this time. "Even if that were true," Dominic said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper, "it changes nothing. The people we owe don't care about family drama. Sign the papers or what? You'll hit me again." He moved so fast I barely saw it coming, but this time I was ready. As his hand swung toward me, I ducked, and his palm hit the wooden wall with a crack. He howled in pain, and in that moment of chaos, Trevor's towel slipped, revealing a wire of his own. "You're wearing a wire?" Dominic screamed at his son. "They made me," Trevor sobbed. The FBI, they caught me at the airport last week. They know everything. I had to cooperate or face 20 years. The revelation that Trevor had flipped on his own father was beautiful, but not as beautiful as what happened next. FBI, nobody move! The sauna door burst open and federal agents poured in, guns drawn. The temperature difference made the steam billow out like a Hollywood special effect. Dominic tried to run, slipped on the wet floor, and face-planted into the lower bench. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Dominic Lewis, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes, the lead agent announced. Then, looking at me with concern, "Ma'am, are you all right? We heard the attempted assault." "I'm fine," I said, stepping over Dominic's prone form. "He's got weak wrists. Must be all that time typing fraudulent invoices." As they cuffed him, Dominic looked up at me with pure hatred. "You've killed us all. They'll come for you." "No, they won't. Because the dangerous people my father supposedly owed, they don't exist. I had Jackson research every loan, every debt, every financial record from my father's business. He owed money to banks, not gangsters. You invented the mob connection to keep us scared and compliant." The look on his face was priceless. He'd been caught in his own lie, the foundational myth of his entire criminal enterprise. Caroline hadn't moved from the bench, staring at the chaos like she was watching a movie. "Brielle, I didn't know. I thought we were really in danger." "You knew enough," I said quietly. "You knew he hit me. You knew I left because of him, and you chose to believe his lies because they came with a comfortable life." Christmas morning arrived with the kind of chaos usually reserved for Black Friday sales at Walmart. The FBI had set up a mobile command center in the driveway, and agents were carrying boxes of evidence out of Dominic's study like ants at a picnic. The local news crews had somehow gotten wind of the arrests and were camped outside the gates, their cameras capturing every humiliating moment. Dominic had spent the night in custody but was brought back to the house in handcuffs to watch the search. Vermont's newest perp walk star looked rough, his expensive haircut mussed, his designer pajamas wrinkled, his face a fascinating shade of green that clashed with the orange jumpsuit. "Merry Christmas, Dominic," I said, sipping coffee from Caroline's best china. "I got you exactly what you deserve." He lunged at me, but the agents holding him weren't having it. One of them, Agent Martinez, actually laughed. "Sir, you just added attempted assault on a federal witness to your charges. Keep going, and we'll have enough for a life sentence." Trevor was in the corner, frantically trying to explain to anyone who would listen that he was cooperating fully. "I'm the whistleblower," he kept insisting. "I came forward." "Actually," Agent Martinez announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, "the original whistleblower was Ms. Estelle Dubois. She's been assisting us for 5 years. Mr. Lewis Jr. only came forward last week when we caught him trying to flee to Costa Rica with $3 million in embezzled funds." Estelle stood by the kitchen door, wearing what I swear was the tiniest smile I'd ever seen. She'd traded her usual uniform for a smart business suit, looking like the secret agent she'd basically been. Caroline wandered through the chaos like a ghost, occasionally picking up items and putting them down as if she couldn't understand why FBI agents were photographing her jewelry. "These are gifts," she kept saying. "Birthday presents, anniversary presents. Purchased with laundered money," Agent Martinez explained patiently. "It's all evidence now." The best part came when the forensic accountants arrived with their preliminary findings. Jackson had flown in that morning. Apparently, he'd been working with the FBI task force all along. The sneaky genius. "So here's what we've found," Jackson announced, pulling up documents on his laptop for everyone to see. Dominic Lewis has been running money through his hotels for various criminal enterprises. Not the mob, as he claimed, but good old-fashioned tax evaders and embezzlers. He used Brielle's inheritance as seed money, turning her trust fund into a washing machine for dirty cash. "How much?" I asked, though I already knew most of it. "Your father's life insurance, $1 million, the trust fund, $2 million. The land holdings, approximately $5 million in current value. Total stolen from your inheritance, $8 million. Caroline fainted, actually fainted, like a Victorian lady with the vapors. An FBI agent caught her and placed her on the couch, fanning her with an evidence envelope. But here's the beautiful part, Jackson continued, his eyes sparkling. Because Dominic used the stolen funds as capital for his criminal enterprise, and because that enterprise generated proceeds of roughly $30 million over 5 years. Under federal forfeiture laws, Brielle is entitled to recover not just her inheritance, but a portion of the criminal proceeds as restitution. How much? My voice was steadier than my hands. Approximately $12 million, after legal fees and taxes. This time, it was Trevor who fainted. Nobody caught him. He hit the floor with a thud that sounded like justice. The doorbell rang, and an agent answered it. A woman in a power suit walked in carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. Diane Morrison, Department of Justice. I'm here to discuss plea agreements. She looked around the room, taking in the chaos with the calm of someone who'd seen worse. Mr. Lewis Sr., you're facing 15 to 20 years. Mr. Lewis Jr., 5 to 10. Mrs. Lewis, you're facing charges as an accessory unless you cooperate fully. Caroline, who had just come around from her fainting spell, promptly fainted again. As for you, Miss Ferguson, Diane turned to me with something that might have been respect. We'd like to offer you a consulting contract. Your forensic accounting skills and insider knowledge of hotel-based money laundering would be invaluable to our financial crimes unit. I looked around the room, at Dominic in handcuffs, at Trevor crying on the floor, at Caroline unconscious on the couch, at Estelle standing proud and vindicated. 5 years ago, I'd run from this house in tears. Now I owned it. Literally, as it turned out, since it had been purchased with my stolen money. I'll consider it, I told Diane. But first, I want to see Dominic's face when he realizes his hotel empire is being liquidated to pay restitution. Agent Martinez pulled up something on his tablet. Actually, we can do that now. The seizure orders just came through. He showed the screen to Dominic, whose face went from green to white to a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. Every hotel, every property, every asset he'd built with my father's money and his criminal enterprise, all frozen, all seized, all gone. You've destroyed everything, he screamed at me. 30 years of work. 30 years of crime, I corrected, and it only took me 5 days to tear it all down. Guess that Harvard MBA Trevor's always bragging about doesn't mean much when you're up against a girl with a community college forensics degree and a grudge. The news crews were getting great footage of Dominic being dragged out, still screaming about ungrateful stepdaughters and family betrayal. Trevor followed, but he went quietly, probably calculating how to flip this into some kind of business school case study about ethics. Caroline remained on the couch, clutching her pearls, which were also being photographed as evidence. "What's going to happen to me?" she asked in a small voice. The investigation's full findings were like opening a Russian nesting doll of crime. Every revelation led to another, worse discovery. Jackson and I spent 3 days going through documents with the FBI, and each file made me angrier and oddly prouder of my father. "Your dad was actually a brilliant businessman," Jackson said, showing me the real books from my father's company. These innovations, these contracts, he was ahead of his time. If he hadn't died in that car accident, I repeated slowly. Something about Estelle's story about her own daughter echoed in my mind. Agent Martinez looked up from his files. "We're actually investigating that too. The timing was suspicious. Your father had just refused to let Dominic invest in his company. 3 weeks later, the accident. A month after that, Dominic married your mother." The room spun. "Are you saying Dominic killed my father?" "We're saying the brake lines were suspicious. The original investigation was rushed. The lead investigator retired to Florida right after closing the case, bought a house cash, a very expensive house. I had to leave the room. Outside, Estelle was waiting with a cup of tea. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. I suspected. My daughter's accident was similar. Same investigator, actually. He died last year, but his widow kept records. She felt guilty, wanted to clear her conscience. She's been talking to the FBI. The weight of it all was crushing. My father hadn't just died. He'd possibly been murdered. My inheritance hadn't just been stolen. It had been the motive for murder. My mother hadn't just made a bad choice in remarrying. She'd married my father's possible killer. But then Jackson showed me something that changed everything. "Your father was paranoid, in the best way," he said. pulling up encrypted files. He backed up everything to a cloud server that Dominic never knew about. Look at this. It was a video message from my father, dated a week before his death. He looked tired but determined, so much like how I remembered him. Brielle, if you're watching this, something has happened to me. I've been receiving threats from Dominic Lewis. He wants my company, my innovations, and I believe he's interested in your mother for access to our assets. I'm hiding money for you, not in the trust Dominic knows about, but in offshore accounts he'll never find. The access codes are hidden in your childhood music box, the one that plays Claire de Lune. I love you, sweetheart. Be stronger than I was. Be smarter than they are. I started crying. Real ugly crying that 5 years of anger hadn't allowed. Estelle held me while Jackson called the FBI agents back in. There's more money? Agent Martinez asked. The music box was in my old room untouched for 5 years. Inside, beneath the spinning ballerina, was a tiny USB drive. It contained account information for 3 offshore accounts, all legally established, containing another $4 million. Your father was protecting you even from beyond the grave, Jackson said softly, but the revelations weren't done. Trevor's laptop, seized during the raid, contained a treasure trove of communications between him and Dominic, discussing not just the money laundering, but their plans for me. If Brielle comes back, we need to either get her to sign or find a way to declare her mentally incompetent. One email read, the therapy angle could work. Girl who abandoned her family clearly has issues. Another discussed hiring someone to seduce me, marry me, and gain control of my assets that way. They'd even identified a candidate, some Wall Street type who specialized in marrying wealthy women and divorcing them for profit. They were planning to destroy me completely, I said, reading through the emails. Instead, you destroyed them. Agent Martinez said with clear admiration. In 5 days, you accomplished what we'd been trying to do for 5 years. The house felt different now, walking through it. Every room held a memory of my father, but also evidence of crimes. In Dominic's study, we found the real books, not just for the money laundering, but for the systematic theft of my inheritance. He'd been billing my trust for everything. Caroline's shopping sprees, Trevor's company setup, even their vacations were classified as trust management expenses. The FBI's forensic accountants were having a field day. This is the most detailed criminal documentation we've ever seen, one of them told me. He recorded every crime like he was proud of it. He was, Estelle said, appearing with more tea. He used to brag to his business partners during those sauna sessions, called it managing the asset when talking about stealing from you. Caroline had been released on bail, wearing an ankle monitor that clashed horribly with her designer shoes. She looked older, defeated, like someone had let all the Botox leak out at once. I want to talk to you, she said, finding me in my father's old office, now revealed to be where Dominic planned his crimes. So talk. I loved your father, I really did, but when he died, I was lost. We had debts. No, we didn't. That was Dominic's first lie. She looked genuinely shocked. But the creditors who came to the house, actors, friends of Dominic. He played you from day one, Mom. The truth seemed to age her another decade in seconds. I chose him over you, my own daughter, for money that wasn't even real. The money was real. It was just stolen. From me, from Dad's legacy, from our family's future. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Maybe someday, but not today. Today I'm going to finish what Dad started, build something real, something honest, something that helps people instead of destroying them. The trials were almost anticlimactic after everything else. Dominic tried to mount a defense based on protecting his family from threats, but when no evidence of these mysterious criminals materialized, his lawyer switched to a plea deal. 15 years, that's what Dominic got for money laundering, wire fraud, embezzlement, and assault. The judge, a woman who looked like she could have been in my mother's book club, was particularly harsh about the assault. You struck a young woman for asking questions about your business, she said, looking at him over her glasses. In what world is that acceptable? In what family is that protection? Dominic tried to maintain his dignity, but it's hard to look dignified when you're wearing orange and your hair plugs are showing. Trevor got 7 years despite his cooperation. Turns out he'd been skimming from the laundering operation for his own benefit, stealing from the thieves. The FBI found a separate account with $2 million he'd hidden from his father. Like son, the prosecutor said, both stealing from the same young woman's inheritance. Caroline avoided jail time by cooperating fully and agreeing to pay massive fines. She lost everything. The house, the cars, the jewelry, the status. She moved into a small apartment in Burlington, got a job at a department store, and started attending therapy. I need to understand how I let this happen, she told me during one of our few conversations, how I chose things over my own daughter. The trials also revealed the extent of the hotel empire's crimes. 17 hotels across New England had been participating in the laundering scheme. Hundreds of employees' pensions had been raided to fund Dominic's lifestyle. The FBI called it one of the largest family-run financial crime operations in Vermont history. Not exactly the legacy he wanted, Jackson joked as we watched the news coverage, but the best part was the restitution hearing. I sat in the courtroom as forensic accountants detailed every penny stolen from my inheritance, every asset purchased with my father's money, every profit made from the criminal enterprise started with my funds. The court awards Ms. Ferguson full restitution of her stolen inheritance, plus damages and proceeds from the criminal forfeiture. Total amount $14,300,000. Dominic actually screamed in court. The bailiffs had to restrain him as he lunged toward me, screaming about ungrateful children and destroyed empires. Your empire was built on my father's grave, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Now it's buried with you. Estelle was awarded $2 million in a separate civil suit for wrongful termination and emotional distress after Dominic had fired her via a lawyer from jail. She used the money to start a foundation for domestic workers who witness crimes in wealthy households. No one should have to choose between their job and their conscience, she said at the press conference. The lakehouse went up for auction. I could have bought it. I certainly had the money now, but I didn't want it. Too many bad memories. Instead, a tech executive from Boston bought it, someone with no connection to any of us. But I did buy something else with my restitution money. Every single hotel from Dominic's former empire. All 17 of them, acquired at fire sale prices when the assets were liquidated. What are you going to do with 17 hotels? Jackson asked, though his grin suggested he already knew. First, I'm going to restore the employee pensions Dominic stole. Then, I'm going to turn them into something my father would have been proud of. Ethical, innovative, community-focused businesses that actually help people. The first thing I did was rehire every employee Dominic had laid off to cut costs. The second was to implement my thesis project, the one Trevor had stolen, across all properties. Revenue increased by 35% in the first quarter. Turns out, honest business is good business. I told a reporter who was doing a story on the criminal empire turned ethical success story. Trevor wrote me a letter from prison, a long, rambling apology that somehow still managed to include 3 requests for me to hire him when he got out. I have an MBA from Harvard, he wrote. I could help you run the hotels. I wrote back, you have a theft conviction from federal court. You couldn't manage a lemonade stand. Caroline started coming to some of the hotel events quietly in the background. She was different now. Humbler, quieter, more like the mother I remembered from before Dominic. We weren't close, might never be, but we were working towards something. I'm proud of you, she said at one event. Your father would be too. Dominic tried to write me once. The letter was full of threats, accusations, and demands for me to send him money for his prison commissary. I sent it to the FBI, who added, threatening a federal witness from prison to his charges. He got another 3 years. It's been exactly 10 years since Dominic Lewis slapped me in a sauna for asking too many questions. 5 years since that Christmas when I came home to confront my demons. A decade of destruction and reconstruction, of falling apart and rising stronger. I'm sitting in what used to be Dominic's flagship hotel, now renamed the Ferguson House, after my father. The sauna where everything started has been converted into a meditation room with a plaque that reads, "In memory of those who spoke truth to power." My phone rings. It's a collect call from a federal prison in Pennsylvania. This is a prepaid call from inmate Dominic Lewis at... I hang up. He calls every Christmas, probably will until his sentence ends in 2039. By then, he'll be 80 years old, and I'll have built an empire that dwarfs anything he ever imagined. But it's not about the money anymore. It's about what I've done with it. The Ferguson Foundation has helped over 200 victims of financial fraud recover their assets. We've funded legal representation for people who couldn't afford to fight back against their own Dominic Lewises. Estelle runs our domestic worker protection program, which has helped 50 whistleblowers safely report crimes they've witnessed. Jackson and I started a forensic accounting firm that specializes in family fraud cases. Turns out there are a lot of Dominics out there, stealing from their own families while claiming to protect them. We've recovered over $100 million in stolen inheritances, embezzled trusts, and fraudulent transfers. Another Christmas, another victory, Jackson says, joining me in my office with 2 glasses of champagne. He's more than a business partner now. We got married 2 years ago in a ceremony at the Vermont Hotel, with Estelle as my maid of honor. Remember when you thought $50,000 was all I'd get? I ask, looking at the photo of my father on my desk. Remember when you thought your family was just dysfunctional, not criminal? We laugh, but it's not bitter anymore. The anger that drove me for so long has transformed into something more useful. Determination to make sure no one else goes through what I did. Caroline sends a text. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. Working my shift at the store today, but thinking of you. She's rebuilt her life honestly, without Dominic's money or influence. She lives simply, works hard, and volunteers at a women's shelter. We have dinner once a month. Not as mother and daughter, exactly, but as 2 women who survived the same man. Trevor gets out in 2 years. He's reached out through his lawyer, asking if there might be a job for him somewhere in my organization. Not in management, he stressed. Maybe maintenance or housekeeping. He's been taking classes in prison, learning actual skills instead of relying on his father's connections. I might hire him to clean the meditation room that used to be the sauna. There's poetry in that. The news is doing a Where Are They Now segment on the Lewis family scandal. They show Dominic's mugshot, then footage of him being dragged out of the lakehouse that Christmas morning. Then they show me cutting the ribbon on my latest hotel acquisition, surrounded by employees whose pensions I'd restored. From victim to victor, the anchor says, Brielle Ferguson turned a family tragedy into a triumph of justice. But that's not quite right. I'm not a victim or a victor. I'm a survivor who refused to let a violent man define my story. I'm a daughter who honored her father's legacy by building something better than his dreams. I'm a woman who learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success that helps others succeed too. My assistant knocks on the door. Ms. Ferguson, there's a young woman here. Says her stepfather has been stealing her inheritance. She heard about what you do and wondered if you could help. I look at Jackson, then at Estelle, who's just arrived for our Christmas lunch. We all smile. Send her in, I say. Let's hear her story. Because that's what we do now. We listen to the stories others ignore. We believe the victims others dismiss. We fight the battles others say can't be won. The young woman walks in, nervous but determined. She reminds me of myself 10 years ago. Scared but not broken. Hurt but not hopeless. It started when my father died, she begins. I lean forward, ready to listen, ready to help, ready to turn another tragedy into triumph. Some slaps wake you up to who you really are. I woke up strong, and now I help others do the same. The meditation room that was once a sauna has a new inscription now added just this morning. The truth doesn't need steam to hide in. Justice doesn't need heat to burn. And family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. Dominic Lewis thought he was building an empire on my father's grave. Instead, he built me a ladder to climb higher than he ever could. And the view from up here? It's worth every moment of pain it took to reach it.